Imagine you're building a mobile diabetes clinic for an Armenian village. You spend a year planning, you train the staff, you raise the funding, you pick a date in July, peak season, when the weather is good, the roads are open, and the village is at its busiest. You arrive, and the village is full of people. Children are running around, the village shop is open till late, families are visiting from the cities. But the patients you're there to see are not actually there, because the older people, the ones with the actual diabetes, the ones that you built the entire clinic for, left in spring, and they're now high up in the mountains with their livestock. And they won't be back until late autumn, when you'll be gone. So the village you're standing in is alive, but the people that you're there to serve are 500 meters above. And nobody you asked in Yerevan, the capital, had told you because they hadn't been there long enough to know the difference. Now, I know this because for a very long time, I was the person designing the clinic. Not that clinic, and not a clinic per se, but the equivalent. I was designing policies in the UK, working in the UK public sector, hoping that I was creating change for the local communities there. The child in me, the one that wanted to be president of the world, to change everything, fix everything, help everyone, she should have been really proud. After all, I was taking steps towards making the world a better place. But every day as I sat in my comfortable, beautiful London apartment, I asked myself the same question. Am I really doing what I've always wanted to do? And the answers varied until one day in November 2020, they didn't. Tears rolled down my face as I told my husband that the world, or at least my world, was ending. I know it sounds dramatic, but that's how I felt at the time. I felt like everything I had done up to that point, all of the efforts that I'd ever put in, were completely futile. As an adult living in the UK, I'd always sort of put off that point at which I would return to Armenia and make a change in my country. I needed to go to university, I needed to get a good degree, I needed to get a good job, earn lots of money so I could come back and invest in my country. But in that moment, my inner child, she took over, and she overruled the young professional Lucy. And so we packed up our things, we handed over the keys to our apartment, and we moved to Debet in Armenia. Now, you have to imagine that we had never been to Lori before this point. And we're very lucky to end up in a co-working, co-living place that gave us both the comfort and the community so that we could continue working while living a much more balanced life. Our morning started with a smell of blooming flowers, shared breakfasts, and long walks through the village, along with the cows, of course. Everything felt right. And on one of these walks, we came across this beautiful field at the end of the village. It was surrounded by walnut trees, grass freshly cropped by the cows, a stone island to the center. You could hear the river streaming alongside. And in that moment, I felt connected, not to a mission or an idea, but to this place. And we fell in love completely with the people, with the surroundings, with this new way of life. We planned to stay for 3 weeks, and we stayed for 3 months, and then we came back, and we stayed for 2.5 years. And slowly something began to shift in me. And I could feel that child in me, she was rejoicing. Now, the longer I spent in Debet, I started to understand that the changes that I was trying to make, the shifts that I wanted to see, I hadn't actually experienced that life myself. I hadn't lived through the problems that I was trying to fix. And, how much did I really understand about, the need of the people that I was trying to help? Those communities in the UK whose lives I was trying to improve, or, the Armenians that hopefully one day I would help. And here's how confident I was that I did, because when I arrived in Debet, the first thing that I tried to fix, and I tried to fix things, believe me, was local governance. And the village didn't have running water, it didn't have a road. And I had convinced myself, sitting, in a co-working, co-living place and working remotely for a UK local government, that what this village really needed was better local governance, without having asked a single one of them. But in reality, designing solutions for small local places from a capital or without really deeply understanding their needs is the same as writing a prescription without examining a patient. You might get it right by coincidence, but more often you will miss something really, really important. But this isn't about nostalgia. This is about presence. I was very lucky to bring up my little boy, who's just over there, in Debet. He is lucky to know that argue till the cows come home, the phrase, isn't just an expression. Because in Debet, the cows actually do come home every single night after they've had their fill, by themselves. And many of you might say, okay, so, lots of leaders have grown up in villages. Surely they should be able to design for local communities. But memory is not proximity. The village that everyone remembers from their childhood no longer exists, just like it won't exist for my son. Because living as an adult in a local community with presence, with responsibility, with daily engagement is very different to growing up somewhere. For a very long time, I believed that London was the center of the world. But the longer I spent in Debet, the more I realized something uncomfortable. I wasn't living at the center. I was living on the periphery. And actually, the changes that I wanted to see, they were much more possible if I deeply understood where I was and where I wanted to be. The thing about these places is that they have their own memories, they have their own understanding, they have their own stories, and if we don't understand these, we can't really create the change. If you think about these local communities, they are in reality places like Debet, places I once thought of as remote. They're much closer to the reality that most people are living on a daily basis. And if we want to design better for them, we need to also experience them. Now, I'm not saying that just because you haven't lived in a local community, you don't deserve an opinion. Of course you do. If I said that, that would be wrong, and many people in this room wouldn't really get to have one. What I'm saying is that without lived experience, your understanding is incomplete. And incomplete understanding, especially when it's coupled with decision-making power, it leads to incomplete solutions. And the people living with the consequences of those decisions, they will feel the effects of those flaws much sooner than you will ever notice them. And so I'm not asking you to think more about villages. What I'm asking you to do is rethink what the mainstream actually is. We think of local communities as something that's, far away. We think of them as something that's marginal. But in reality, it's the center that's the anomaly. Local is the norm. Local is how most people live. About 1 million people live in Yerevan. More than 2 million live outside of the capital. That's twice as many. And even globally, in an increasingly urban world, the gap between the people who are making the decisions and those whom those decisions affect, that gap is only increasing, not shrinking. So, what am I asking you to do? I'm not saying give up your life, upend your everything and move to a village. What I'm saying is that if you are funding a policy, if you are making a decision, if you're designing a program, go and spend time in a place where you think you already understand, but not for a weekend. Long enough for the seasons to shift on you. Long enough for you to see the pipes freeze in the winter. Long enough for you to see the hailstones break the plants in the spring. To feel the pain of your back from carrying sun-kissed tomatoes back from the field in the summer. And that's not going to necessarily make you better at everything. It's not necessarily going to change the way you do things, but what it will do is it will help you understand what you don't know, not make you an expert. It didn't make me one. And that's where the foundation of good decision starts. And maybe then, when we're designing a mobile clinic for a local village again, we'll think to bring it in October rather than in July. Notice the changes, notice the sounds, notice the rhythms, ask questions, and most importantly, listen. Because real change, the kind that lasts, the kind that genuinely affects people, is always local.